welcome you all to the 10th webinar of Plant Breeding Webinar Series. These webinars are being organized by the Foundation for Advanced Training in Plant Breeding on a monthly basis. And today we have Mr. Rajiv Dagga, who will talk about hybrid vigor, the century-old conundrum driving the seed industry and the way forward. The purpose of these webinars are to sensitize people to know and value the importance of plant breeding, and also to create an awareness on various aspects like technology integration, policy support, regulatory overview, farmers' comprehensions, and various other aspects required for inclusive development of agriculture in order to achieve food security. Foundation for Advanced Training in Plant Breeding is a non-profit organization which aims to promote advanced technology in plant breeding and develop qualified plant breeders who would complement and add value to the existing system. Our efforts are towards creating a conducive ecosystem where skillful organizations or resourceful persons work together to develop joint courses, research, and co-incubations. ATPVR organized professional training, workshop, and various awareness sessions to build required competencies of the global standard. And we also organize annual conference named as 5A Farming Conference in different locations across India. ATPVR aspired to bridge the gap between university and industry by developing job-ready human resource to feed the market requirement and encourages potential entrepreneurs to succeed in their journey. Now, I would like to take the privilege to introduce our moderator, Dr. Krishna Prasad sir. He worked with ICR for about 27 years in different capacities in organizations like IDA, IHR, and DOGR. Later, he joined in Advanta as India Research Lead Vegetable Crop, and now presently, he is working as Breeding and Research Lead at Tierra Sea Science Private Limited. He has published around 200 research papers and contributed to the development of around 40 varieties and hybrid of various crops, including tomatoes, eggplant, cucumber, rich gourd, sponge gourd, pointed gourd, green peas, French bean, pole beans, and delicacy beans. His brinjal varieties are the source of resistance to bacterial wilt in breeding program all over India. So it's really an honor to have Dr. Krishna Prasad sir as the moderator of this session, and now I request Prasad sir to take the floor. Sir, over to you.
Good morning, friends. It gives me a great pleasure for me to be in this ATPVR meeting. And first of all, I thanks Aparna Tiwari and his group.
You have to speak a little louder, Dr. Krishna Prasad. You have to speak a little louder, please. You have to speak a little louder. We can't hear you.
Okay.
Speak a little louder.
Hello?
Increase the volume of your mic.
Yeah, full. I have put full. It's okay now?
Yeah.
Hello?
Fine, but speak louder, please.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, I thank you very much, Dr. Aparna Tiwari, for selecting me as a moderator for this program, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak few words before starting this program. I have about 5 minutes time. I just give an introduction for this program. Indian seed market is about nearly $4.9 billion in 2020. And it is going at the rate of CAGR is about 6.8%. By 2025, it may reach about $7 billion US dollars. And it is mainly due to hybrid seed penetration in the seed in the farmers' fields. And also, there are about several limitations are there because of this raging food demand and mismatch between demand and supply, stagnant growth in the arable land cultivation, and constant increase of population, and poor crop productivity is one of the main reasons for the we are little slow CAGR rate, I can say, for the projected period. And as we know, we have accomplished in many of the field crops, especially the hybrid penetration in cotton is about nearly 90%. We have already achieved, and corn is about 60%. And nearly 80% we achieved in millets, sorghum, pearl millet, and also oilseeds and sunflower, nearly 80%. And the hybrid penetration in major crops like paddy and wheat is only 5 to 6%. Then this is the major area where the focus will be more for the hybrid penetration is required for increasing the production and productivity of our country. And these today speaker, our Rajiv Taggar, may give emphasis for the biotechnological tools for increasing the productivity of these two main these crops also. And at the same front, I just also speak about vegetables also. The onion and the tomato are the major two important crops in vegetables. Where if you see the just focus on the onion is about 10,000 tons of onion seed is being produced every year, and of which 90% is under OP, open pollinated varieties, and less than 6 to 7% is hybrids. And nearly about 7,000 tons of onion seed is being produced by the farmers, and only 3,000 tons seed produced by the what we call professional traders and the seed producers. And it may be due to the progress is not much in onion, especially it's a vast crop and will have a lot of possibility to increase the hybrid heterosis in this onion group. When you see the developed nations like USA and Netherlands and all, total onion cultivation based on the hybrid cultivation. Of course, they are the long day onions, but in India, we are just 5 to 6%, and there is a vast scope for this heterosis exploitation. And Rajiv Taggar's tools may help us to put hybrids into this gap so that we can increase the production in onion also. Coming to the tomato, these are the two important crops, and we produce nearly 119 million tons annually. And that is insufficient for the annual demand. Our rural productivity is about 70 tons per hectare, whereas our productivity is only 25 tons per hectare. Whereas USA's productivity is about 96 tons per hectare. There is a large gap. In spite of hybrid penetration is very much in tomato in our farmers' fields, there is a large gap. We need to use these biotechnological tools to increase the productivity and the yields in terms of disease resistance, in terms of abiotic and biotic stresses. And global tomato production, just I'm giving these figures, 182 million tons in 5 million hectares, global tomato production. Whereas China is about 61.63 million tons in 1.3 million hectares. Whereas in our country is only 19.38 million tons from only 8 million hectares. There is a large gap. Here also, hybrid exploitation is very, very important. As you know, this global seed market is going very rapidly. Seed market is the projected US seed, Indian global seed market is about $86.8 billion by 2026, and presently $63 billion from 2021 at the rate of CAGR growth rate is about 6.6%. There is a huge demand for this $86.8 billion to reach that goal. There is new technological tools, especially will help us to develop high and improved varieties and hybrids for this to reach these goals. As you know, that hybrid vigor is one of the greatest practical contribution of the genetics for agricultural world, and most significant expression was observed in maize crop, intensively explored by the breeders as well as the seed companies. Biotechnological tools and the molecular genetics for hybrid programs to diminish the hand pollination work and obtain embed lines from heterotic groups through molecular markers are the new breeding ways for developing, exploiting the heterosis. And as we all know, heterotic groups and patterns are fundamental importance for the hybrid breeding program. Now, today's lecture, our Rajiv Taggar will give you on these heterosis aspects, and it will be nice. I introduced that Rajiv Taggar is an eminent biotechnologist and a founder and head of the Sai Cup Biotech Chandigarh. He imparts professional training consultancy in the application of biotechnology, specialist in molecular bidding, imparts training for and industrial staff, university researchers and lecturers, college students in the area of plant breeding. Associated with the seed industries, he worked in Bayer for about more than a decade. Presently, Monsanto, presently Bayer Crop Sciences. He also worked in Ecosat and Precision Seeds and also Green World Genetics of Thailand, Malaysia, sorry. And he successfully identified test crop using DNA barcoding, use of SSR, RAPD markers in cotton and maize genotyping. Protocols have been developed for hybrid purity in cotton and maize, DNA finger purity using ISR markers, and purification of inbred lines for molecular marking. Initiated in gene tagging in MS maize variety in cotton, and also imparts his organization imparts a training in molecular assisted selection, molecular assisted backcross breeding, diversity analysis, mitotic grouping, DNA fingerprinting, hybrid seed purity testing, genome-wide association, QTL mapping using biparental process, genetic mapping using multi-parent process like magic population, genomic selection, reverse breeding, gene tilling, eco-tilling, molecular markers technologies. Everything is covered. Now, his experiences and his lecture will wide open the technologies for us to take up in our breeding programs, and it will be more helpful for us, and especially more students, researchers will be taken advantage of this lecture. I invite Dr. Rajiv Taggar, 1 minute, and he had his MPhil crop genetics from University of Reading in the United Kingdom, MSc plant genetics and crop improvement in Janin Center, University of East Anglia, United Kingdom, and he obtained botany, MSc botany, and also MPhil botany from Kurukshetra University. With this background, I introduce Dr. Rajiv Taggar to this forum to deliver his talk. Rajiv, please take over.
Yes, yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Krishna Prasad. Thank you very much for the kind words and the introduction. And I would also like to thank ETPBR for giving me this chance to talk before such audience. Just to check it up, is my voice clear? Am I audible enough?
Yes.
If some,
Yes,
my,
yes, okay.
Oh, okay,
Sir,
thank
yes,
you
sir.
very much. Okay, so
Yes.
let me share my slides first.
Rajiv, can you please switch on your video?
Is my video not switched on?
It's on, madam.
It's on.
It's on.
Okay, so
Please,
that's
please share your,
Yeah,
okay.
share your.
we can
Yes,
see
I'm,
him.
yeah, I'm doing that, sir.
Yeah.
Is it shared already?
No,
Yeah, entire screen.
entire screen, click
Yeah,
there and then,
Yeah, it's coming, sir. It's coming.
okay.
Am I in?
Yes,
I
it's
hope-
coming now. It's
It has
coming.
come.
All right,
Yeah.
so let me start.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. The topic of the talk is hybrid vigor, the century-old conundrum driving the seed industry and the way forward. Right. It's been a long journey, over 100 years, and there's a lot of classical explanation for this, and then I shall be discussing also the molecular basis of it. And then again, there are other, implications coming up, like, is there a unifying theory, and how we can apply the process of heterosis towards making better hybrids, and also what we can do in the future, what the latest research has to give to us at the moment and in the coming foreseeable near future. So it's going to be a lot. So it's going to be, let me say, it's going to be messy on the way, because there's a lot I have to explain. But bear with me and trust me, towards the end, despite all the mess in between, we will reach somewhere and we'll have something very, very interesting together. There will be something nice on the table and it will make sense. Right. Okay. Hybrid vigor. The term heterosis was coined by Schull in 1914, and this was used the meaning of the term was a stimulating effect of hybridity, meaning when we cross a male and female parent, that hybridity itself leads to some sort of a stimulus which gives a better yield in the hybrid. Now, over a period of time, hybrid vigor and the term heterosis, this has been used, reciprocally. It's been used synonymously. However, that is not the case, because when we say hybrid vigor is always vigor, good vigor, you see, and heterosis can be negative heterosis and can be positive heterosis also. So hybrid vigor is the bigger part of, is a bigger view of compared to the heterosis. Right, and I'm in a lot of statements that I make, I have given the references whereby those statements they prove they will show where they come from and prove the validity of my. Now this is how the hybrids look like, and by the sides we can see the parents, and in the middle we can see, in case of maize, we can see the hybrid, both in terms of vegetative growth and also in terms of the cob, the fruit which is coming out. So the differences are quite clear. Right, the classical explanation of genetic heterosis, normally it's been explained in terms of three terms: the dominance, over-dominance, and recessive. In addition to these terms, other terms have been also used, which includes partial dominance, additive dominance, or non-additive dominance, or pseudo-dominance, super-dominance, or under-dominance. I shall not be, because there are other things which I have to cover, so I shall not be going in there too much of it, not the other terminologies. So I'll focus on dominance, dominance, epithesis, but all of these will stand covered by the time we approach towards the end of the talk. They will be all covered. Right. Now let's talk about dominance. See, in case of dominance, the concept is, and the proposal was, that there are dominant in a gene. A parent can have, within a gene, a parent can have different forms of the gene which are called allele. Now, if it's a good allele, it's been found out that is dominant, and if it's a bad allele which causes diseases or it decreases the vigor, that is called a recessive allele. So this dominance theory is based that whenever male and female they come together to make a hybrid, the better gene becomes the dominant gene, and it suppresses the deleterious allele, and that becomes silent. So only one allele comes through. So and that is why it is called dominant, and it's the dominant theory. So obviously, so we are talking only about within those genes and not beyond. Now the point to notice here is that the heterozygosity itself per se has got nothing to do with it, because if one allele from one parent is doing all the talking, the other allele from the other parent is simply silent and doing nothing. So dominance theory does not base itself on the heterozygosity per se. It simply says that one gene, one allele suppresses, or it becomes dominant over the other allele. Now, there's a lot of literature. So obviously, I haven't given so many of references here, but just some good references which will tell you that there's a lot of literature, a lot of proof is there, to stand by these theories. Okay. Now, when we talk about over-dominance, it's the opposite, not opposite, but it's on the other side of dominance. And unlike dominance, where heterozygosity is not really a concern, over-dominance is based on heterozygosity per se, which means that heterosis itself happens because of the union, because of homozygosity, heterozygosity. Now let me go back one slide earlier, and let me go this one. See here in over-dominance, when it was started by Schull, what it meant was his emphasis is on it's a stimulus. He calls it a stimulus. which is induced by dissimilar gametes. So this over dominance hypothesis is supposed, it's based on a stimulus, and that stimulus happens when the two alleles in a sexual union, they unite, and male and female, when they come together, that union itself, heterozygosity itself, creates a stimulus which increases the vigor, and that is the concept. So that vigor depends upon both the male and the female, right? Now, let us compare the dominance and over-dominance. In this chart, we can say, if you look at the green parts, and if you look at the middle bar, where it's written additive. So is my cursor visible? If I move the cursor, is it visible?
Yes, yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much. So in the middle, if you look at the in the chart, if you look at the middle bar, that is that is the effect, which is equal to, on the right hand side we see a purple parent and the the blue. The purple and the blue, these are the two parents. One is the low parent, which is giving the the less character, and the purple is the parent which is giving a better character, the more character. So bad and good, or lower or higher, these are the two. So when we are talking about dominant, if you see in the middle, that is exactly equal to the better parent. So in other words, the lower parent has got nothing to do and is becoming silent, and the higher parent is becoming dominant, and that is additivity. Now let's go to over-dominance. For over-dominance, we go to the extreme part and we look at the extreme bigger bar, and that bigger bar is, we can see it's better than the red one. So the red is the higher parent, and this green bar on the extreme right is bigger than the red parent, and that means the effect of hybridization or the male, the progeny, they show an effect which is bigger than the better parent. So this is over dominance, means better than dominance of the better parent. So we have over dominance and dominance here. Right. Now, this is, like I said, there are a lot of examples for everything. And for over dominance also, there's a lot of literature to prove it. And this was a beautiful one, which came from Denis Zamil's, group. And in this case, these are two male and female parents, tomato parents. In the middle, we have, the hybrid, and which is showing yield, which is clearly far superior to the better parent. And this was found out to be because of over dominance. And so obviously there's a lot of literature. I've mentioned just three good papers which will prove that over dominance is not proven, just the way dominance has been proven. Now there's a third hypothesis, which is the epistasis. Now in case of dominance, we were talking about alleles within a gene. In case of epistasis, we are talking about non-allelic genes. So one gene is interacting with a totally different gene, and the effect of non-allelic gene or a different gene on the gene of interest is showing up. That effect is called epistasis. So right now let's also compare this with the theory of over-dominance. Now we know that in case of dominance, it's just the alleles within a gene. In case of epistasis, we are talking about alleles which are come from a different gene or set of genes. But in case of, you see, that is where the ambiguity comes in, because over-dominance is just a stimulus. Now that is why this concept is not, although it talks about the effect, what is the effect, that the effect will be better than the higher parent, there is a certain amount of ambiguity in when we say the word stimulus, and I'll come to this point shortly in my next. Now, when we say term misuse overlaps in meaning, you see all the breeders present here, they will probably agree with me, and all the quantitative geneticists, that this term over dominance, there's a lot of ambiguity, because over dominance, there are times when over dominance is mistaken to be epistasis and the other way, because stimulus, now where is this stimulus coming from? Is this stimulus coming only from the other allele, or is it coming from the whole genome? Is it coming from other? Because the dominance, the theory of over-dominance itself is silent. It doesn't say anything about where that stimulus is coming from. So that is the reason when we say over-dominance, we know its effect that it's better than the higher parent, but in terms of which genes, is it the same gene involved or other genes are involved? That is where, sometimes there's a conflict. There are times when we say, okay, is it epistasis or over-dominance? And even partial dominance, you see, supposingly we have two genes which are dominant genes, and two parents having a partially dominant gene, one giving 0.7%, another giving 0.7 partial, and when they come together and they make 1.4, the effect is, is that over dominance? I'm talking about transgressive segregation here. Is that transgressive segregation because of partial dominance? Is it because of two different genes coming together, or is it because of is it because of over dominance? And this is also confused. This is also, there's a concept of pseudo over dominance also, wherein the two genes, they are closely associated with each other, and their effects can mask each other's effect. It can go down or go high, giving an impression of over dominance. So over dominance is, although this is called a stimulus, to say this, that there is the terms they are used to a certain extent in an overlapping manner, and there is a misuse of the terms also. Right. Now, this is where I would like to come to the bigger issue, the bigger picture. See, heterosis is a complex trait, and this is an unnatural trait. The plant doesn't say, I want to have heterosis. At the level of plant, what exists is, this is a continuous struggle for survival, fitness, and reproduction. The plant doesn't know, supposingly, the plant needs defense. And in order to get defense, it utilizes its resources, and that because the defenses, resistances are building up, the yield might go down. For the plant, that is a good thing because it's fighting for its survival, fitness, and reproduction. For us, from the human application point of view, it's a negative heterosis because the yield is going down. But for the plant, this is good. So from the so let's be very clear. When we talk about heterosis, this is an unnatural phenomenon. For the plant, it doesn't exist. For the plant, what exists is a continuous struggle for survival, fitness, and reproduction. So when we study heterosis, it's very important that we look from the angle of survival, fitness, and reproduction, and then we will understand why negative heterosis is happening and why positive heterosis is happening, right? And also, to say another point here, that it's a complex trait in the sense that there are hundreds of traits. There are small traits involved. It can be the number of, let's say, the number of fruits, or the fruit size, or the vegetative growth, or the number of the flowers. So there are a lot of things, or maybe even the nutrition wonder. So there are a lot of factors which are involved in the phenomenon of heterotic. It's not just one character. Okay. Now, having said that, like I said, heterosis is something which is governed by the plant, and it's an unnatural thing. And for the plant, what matters is the plant survival, fitness, and procreation, reproduction. That is the reason all of these traits, they can happen at the same time. In certain cases, over-dominance is more than dominance is more than epistasis, or all of them are taking place. So the degree of dominance, over-dominance, epistasis can vary. The plant doesn't care. And so that is the reason I've given all these references, and these references clearly show that all of these effects are actually happening in nature, and no one effect is complete in itself. Right. Now we look at this, this is again, the reference is given here. And what we can say is that, the researcher have, they've given multiple crops here, and they've also given how much of these different different genetic effects were observed. And we can say 42%, in all of these diverse crops, they found over-dominance, 19% dominance, 11%, let's say, a partial dominance, and epistasis was 23%. So we see that all of these effects are happening. Now that brings us to the next point. oh, sorry, I'm sorry. The unifying theory. Now, if this is happening, is there something happening? Can we think about the bigger picture? Right. Here is a quote which I'm quoting from one of the journals. It appears that heterosis cannot be explained by any single hypothesis, and the causes of heterosis depend upon the species traits and parental combinations. Very clear. Secondly, these hypotheses of dominance over dominance they are not mutually exclusive. So that means it's not necessary for any one of them to happen alone. And then, now this is very important, you see, in this paper, and these are all very prominent journals, and in this paper, and this, mind you, this paper comes from 2003, and very similar remarks I've seen from papers. Obviously, I cannot put those papers as early as 1930, 1935, 1960. So this term, net-like structure. So a lot of them are saying that probably all these genes and causes the genes are into a net-like structure, wherein one gene affects another gene, and we are talking about something like global means whole genome phenomenon, and not just limited to any one isolated gene. And this we will discuss at more length. Now, what is the basis of? So I will discuss this, that none among dominance over dominance and epistasis can clearly explain all the heterosis in all the crops. Secondly, negative heterosis cannot be explained by any of these models. It can only be explained when we say that, you know, the plant itself is in command, and that works on the, you know, the requirements of the plant are not heterosis or hybrid vigor. No, this is about survival, fitness, and procreation. And then, like the last point which I say. So we go to see this whole thing, and that is, in that context. Now, so this will broadly come to give us some sort of an indication about the unifying theory. And as we move towards the end, we will talk also about the molecular support also, and this will become a bit more clear. Now we talk about epigenetic effects on heterosis, but before that, what exactly is epigenetics? The term epi means upon, and genetic means genetic. So epigenetics means something upon genetics. Something, a mechanism, a phenomenon, a process which controls genetics. So this is the branch of science or the mechanisms which govern the entire genome, how the genome operates, how the genome evolves. So they're not working at smaller levels. So far, we've been talking about dominance and over dominance and all these things because we are talking at a smaller level. When we talk at the, epigenetics is something which works at a bigger level. This can control whole genomes. And also when two genomes come together, like in case of sexual fusion, union, then again, when the heterozygosity happens or when the hybrid happens, that is where epigenetics can take control. Now, it's not just that. Epigenetics is also something which, now, how does it do that? Epigenetics controls how the chromosomes are packaged and how they are expressed. Now, in the next slide, it will be a bit more clear. But to say something that epigenetics does not obey always the Mendelian principles. No, next. Now, what are the pillars of epigenetics? The pillars of epigenetics are DNA methylation. Now, these are the marks which happen, like in this cytosine. These are the marks on the DNA. They've got nothing to do with the DNA sequence, but they are simply the marks. Also the chromatin, the histones. The histone proteins which are present around the nucleotides, they also have a very prominent role to play in how the genome operates and evolves. And the third is RNA. A lot of processes, how epigenetics governs the DNA. The RNA has a lot of role to play there. So these are the pillars of epigenetics. Right. Now I come to, so there are a lot of cases which can be discussed here, but I'll take one case on epigenetics, which will prove clearly the role of epigenetics. So I'll give rest of the references, but one paper will be discussed nicely. Okay, so what they did was, they took 500 Arabidopsis lines. These were near isogenic lines, so that means genetically, from the DNA point of view, they were all similar, nearly similar. But they were showing a lot of different characters. So what they did was they looked at the epigenetic marks and they found that the methylation, the DNA methylation was hugely different. There was a lot of differences in DNA methylation on these near isogenic lines. Okay, so what they did was they did the phenotypic screening of all these 500 lines. So they looked for leaf area, growth rate, flowering time, and all these quantitative traits were, measured. And then they did QTL mapping. Okay, so then they observed that there was a strong positive and negative heterotic phenotype correlation between the lines and the alleles, so and the epigenetic markers. Okay, so they did. So this is, so in this case, the terms they're using is epigenetic QTL mapping and epialleles, because we are talking not about the sequence, but we are talking about the methylation marks on top of the. And now let's discuss the figure work, right? So we can say in this case, there are 5 chromosomes of Arabidopsis. From left to right, these black and white boxes are basically 5 chromosomes, and from top to bottom there are different lines. And we can say that, and from left to right, these are not only the chromosomes, but also within each block there are about 126 epigenetic markers. So these epigenetic markers, they all differ in all the lines. So that's like something like epigenetic fingerprinting. So these are like epigenetic fingerprint. Okay, so when they did the QTL mapping, so we can see in all the 5 chromosomes, they found QTLs which were associated with the quantitative traits, these peaks of green and white, the red. Green comes with, so in this case it's the root length and let's say pericentric flowering time. So all these QTLs, they were associated with the epigenetic markers. And here is now this is to show that we can see in some of the cases, on the extreme left we say bars are going down. That means it's actually with it's negative heterosis. In the middle lane we say it's going up. The bars are going up. It's positive heterosis. And in the extreme right again we see the bar is going up, which is positive. So for these 3 different traits, we see that the negative heterosis in 1 and positive heterosis in 2 of the traits. Right. So what they did was just to exclude that there are that these are actually being caused by, the differences are actually being caused by epialleles and not because of any DNA sequence. So they looked at the RNAs, they looked at the transcriptome, they looked at the methylome, of course, and they also looked at the transcriptome basically. So and of course the genomes were sequenced, and they found out that transcriptome and the genome had nothing to do with these QTL. Based on these parameters, the QTL, the traits could not be justified. The justification could only come from epialleles. And that is a very clear indication, I think, and this is a great publication wherein it clearly proves that epialleles, they cause heterosis. Okay, so I will not go too much into it. I think that stands proven. Now, there are a lot of references here, and these are all very nice references which clearly prove that epialleles exist, and epigenetics marks which do not have anything to do with the DNA sequence can actually affect heterosis. Right.
Mr. Dilip Verma, I think Rajiv, we have lost your presentation.
Oh.
Somebody tried to share his presentation.
No, sir. We are able to see. We are able to see, sir.
No, I am not able to see anything.
Sir, perhaps due to internet bandwidth.
We are not seeing.
No, I can see everybody, but I can't see the presentation. I don't know.
Sir,
we are seeing.
Is my presentation visible now?
Please go ahead.
Sir, I'll reshare again. I'll disconnect and reshare again.
No, your presentation is visible, Rajiv.
And
It's not visible.
Yeah.
It is not visible, sir. It is not coming.
If it is visible,
Not
to
visible.
everybody,
So you have to pin. You have to pin. It is
if it is
disappear.
visible
for
to
sure.
everybody, it's okay.
No, but
It is not coming.
okay. Do you suggest I?
No, what
How many?
Panna ma'am
It's
has
not-
said.
How many are not seeing?
Share the slide.
You see, one Dilip Verma tried to present his slide.
Oh,
That is when this thing happened.
Oh,
I
I see.
request
Yes,
Mr.
yes.
Verma to unshare his presentation, and maybe Rajiv, can you exit and present again? I am sure
Yes,
many
sir.
are not here.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I'll do
Thank you.
that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Unknown caller.
Please switch off your mobiles, please. Hey, Rajiv, it's coming.
No, sir, looks like he has exited the meeting and he may be joining again perhaps.
Video now is visible.
Mukesh, I'm here.
Click on now.
Watch me.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Okay, boss, sir, boss. Yeah. Okay. Right, I'm sharing.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yes, very good.
So
Everybody is saying
Yes, you are there.
okay,
Fine.
is it clear?
very
Clear, clear.
And my,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
right.
Now it is coming.
Now there's another phenomenon. Having discussed the within epigenetics, there's another phenomenon which is quite important. It's just a part of epigenetics, but it's important to discuss imprinting. Now, imprinting basically what means is when two parents are, they are coming together, to cross, and the progeny they carry, rather than both the parents, both the parents do not contribute equally to the offspring or to the hybrid. One parent, it masks the effect of another parent, and this could even be, so that imprint. Now, this word imprint comes that some of the genes from one parent, they are silencing the gene of the other parent. So, the hybrid looks, more like the male or more like the female. Now, this is very different from dominance. So this is very different from, because we are talking about an epigenetic phenomenon. It's got nothing to do with DNA. No, and in this case, imprinting, this process of imprinting, because from the, and now this process, it's got nothing to do with the genes coming from the male and the female parents. It's just that process wherein imprinting basically means that the hybrid shows more of male or more of female. So that is where, and in this case, again, it's been found that this process of imprinting, what's been observed is that these are in fact certain marks which tell a parent which genes are going to be suppressed, or which genes are going to be silenced. So these epigenetic marks on the DNA on the certain genes, and this is and this is also the reason which many readers will agree with me. This is very, seen in let's say, in cases like maize, when we talk about reciprocal hybrids, that's when we are talking about imprinting, and that male, right. But the phenomena of so that is also the reason why okay, now let me say in this, because imprinting happens. You see, we'll talk about heterotic grouping also later on, and normally we talk about heterotic grouping. Now I'm jumping the topic a little, but because it concerns imprinting, in many crops, separate heterotic groups are formed for male and female. So let's say if imprinting takes place in maize, we know that male and female, they have a separate effect. They show imprinting, and imprinting can be more of male effect or female effect. And that is the reason why there will be separate heterotic groups for the male and for the female. So imprinting has an application in heterosis. Right. Now the examples of imprinting, I've given these references here. And now I've come to the transcriptional, just to have a look at how good we are with the time. Okay, now I come to the transcriptional evidence. Now here is a paper, is a publication, and we see the male, female, on the Arabidopsis on the top and the bottom, and in the middle we see the hybrid. And from left to right, we are talking about days after sowing, and we see that slowly the plant is developing and how the development is taking place in the seedlings. We isolate the transcripts and we look at the transcripts, this is what we find out. In this case, we say PER1 and col 0. These are the parents, and F1 is there at the bottom. We see there is sharing of the two parents, and there is also sharing between all the three parents. So that means basically that there are transcripts which are shared between two parents, one parent and hybrid, another parent and hybrid, and there are certain transcripts which are present in parents but not anywhere else, and there are certain transcripts which are present only in the hybrid. They are not present. So this is the scenario when we look at what is happening inside the transcript tome at a global level. Okay, what are the I'm not going to the complications. So all the papers for molecular molecular studies here, I'll be delivering only the simplified conclusions. In this case, what was observed was transcriptional reprogramming was taking place in the hybrid. So in a lot of publications, I'll be giving references also, there is a transcriptional reprogramming happening, which is also visible from the earlier Venn diagram. Now, differentially expressed genes were observed across parents and hybrids. So in this case, we find both. We find novel transcripts, and we also find differentially expressed transcripts when there is less or more of it in the hybrid than compared to the parents. But there are also novel, like we saw in the last. Now, another good point is when we look at the hybrids, in certain cellular processes like photosynthesis and cell cycle, we find there is a special, there's a lot of upregulation or downregulation happening. So there is a lot of changes. There are a lot of changes happening in certain pathways. For example, photosynthesis, cell cycle. Now this will help us towards the end when we conclude finding the transcripts responsible for heterosis. So we'll come to this point, but just to state here. And both of these networks. Now the other good thing is that all these networks, there are a lot of these changes are happening in the early stages of plant development, and this is these are okay. So fine. So this is the outcome of the publication, the paper which I just showed you. This is another publication, and in this publication, again the same thing was in this case. We see the hybrid is here, H318. And one of them is a hybrid. Okay, probably 4. So in this case, again, what we see is there are certain transcripts present only in hybrid, and there are transcripts which are being shared between the parents. Now, in this case, what they, again, the take-home message was that they found transcripts which were differentially regulated or expressed, and the pathways were, they were involved in the pathways of enhanced photosynthesis, lipid and carbohydrate metabolism. So we know these transcripts are, they are really going up and down. They're shuffling quite a bit. Another paper here, and what they did was they looked at the mRNA profile. So they are doing transcriptome profiling here also, and they found a lot of DEGs are differentially expressed genes. So a lot of genes, they were differentially expressed. And also what they found was, see here, they found overdominance 76%, dominance, additive dominance 19%, and epistasis, and additive dominance and dominance, non-additive overdominance. So anyway, so across this dominance, overdominance, and additive and non-additive dominance, they had variable percentage of share of the trait expression or the transcript production. Now, in this case, I think this is a very nice picture. In this case, what happened was, I think it's the same publication. They had 384 functionally differentially expressed genes. 12 were up-regulated and 16 they were down-regulated. So some of what they were going up or they were going down. Now, if we look at the picture here, if we look at the set A and set B, in both of these set A and set B, there are 2 parents and 1 hybrid. So first 2 are parents and the last one is a hybrid, F1 hybrid. Now let us look at the parents. Let us look from top to bottom. All these small bars, they are, which fuse with each other, they are different transcripts. The coloration is as green is, let's say, less less expression of the transcript, and red is the more expression of the transcript. Now let us compare. Let's just take one transcript in the top. What we see is, in the male, in one parent we have green, and in one we have a red. And the parent is what? The parent is black, means somewhere in the middle. So that means the expression is in the hybrid, it's neither red nor green, neither low, neither high nor high, but it is somewhere in the middle. Similarly, if we go, let's somewhere in the middle. Let's go where my cursor is going. The green in one parent towards the hybrid is turning into red. That means low expression is hybrid in parent is becoming high expression in hybrid. Similarly, if we go down, red, high expression in the same parent is going low. So you see that in some of the genes, they are being up-regulated, they are being down-regulated. And based on this, we can tell how the pathways they are being affected, but clearly something drastic is happening. And we will take conclusions towards the end, we will draw conclusions from here. But obviously there's a lot happening, and this is happening between the stage when seedling is anywhere between 1 to 6 days after sowing, as we will talk later. Right. Okay. Now here is a link here. You see, now this is something very, this is, it's got, excuse me, it's not just basic research we are talking about. This is something which has now been commercialized, which is something which is, I mean, I've been obviously, we all have been interacting with a lot of breeding community, and we know what's happening in the seed industry. I'm yet to see in India where these things are happening, and or maybe these things are happening in the closed doors, but not to my knowledge. Now, here is a group. Now, Professor Ian Bancroft's group and David Stokes, this is the group I worked with at John Innes Center, and they worked on the same thing. And I was lucky to discuss with David Stokes for quite a bit of time, and his PhD work was involved exactly on the same thing, transcript profiling between hybrids and parents. And no, I was surprised. I mean, I left John Innes in 2008, but I only yesterday, and that is the beauty of, and that is the reason, that's what I love about presenting. I came to find out that they've commercialized the whole thing. If you go to SeedQuest, the same group, the Bancroft group, they are now selling this technology of looking for hybrids simply based on transcripts, based on the transcriptional profiling. And they have converted, they've commercialized it, and I'm giving you the link. If you can, and it's I mean, there's nothing hard about, there's nothing difficult about it, which we cannot do here or which anybody else cannot do. But the thing is, they have commercialized and it's happening. Just to say that what we are talking is not something, we are not talking in the air. This is not something. So even if people don't understand, they are not in touch with these developments, well, the word is already there. Well, it was there 10 years back. So this was put up in SeedQuest 2010, and this research happened when I discussed with David Stokes. It was in 2006, and today is 2021. So it's not, we are not talking in thin air. This is something which is already happening, and it's happened long back somewhere else. Right. Now, this is what the prediction of heterosis in hybrid crops. So this is the technology. This is what they call the name of the technology. Here, this is a very nice picture. What they do is, if we look at, what they did was there are 19 maize hybrids, and they used 40 to 45 transcripts. So they make markers, and they had 45 transcripts, and based on that, they looked at, how they can predict a good hybrid. So imagine it from the seedling stage, you take out the transcripts, and they can tell you it's going to be a bad hybrid. And what is the correlation? Look at the correlation coefficient R square. It is 0.89. That is very high. Now, let's not forget that for a breeder, rejection is equally important as selection. So if the association is so high at the seedling stage itself, so many hybrids can be rejected. So that is something, I think this is an outstanding, result, and it's commercialized, and this graph gives very nice, it's a very clear black and white results, in which should be put into practice. I don't know why. I'm not sure how much of it is being applied, at least in India. Anyway, next point. And that is also the purpose of this talk. Again, there are a lot of other papers, but I'll not go into it. I think that topic. Okay, now I'll move to the next point. So it's very clear that the transcripts are changing. I have to be faster now. The transcripts are changing, but no. So I'm going to give this particular section a go. Now I'm talking about seedling stage. What I mean in the subsequent slide is that at the seedling stage, between 1 to, let's say, 10 days of seedling growth, everything is visible. A lot of transcripts, they are going up and down, and after that the growth gets stabilized, and then you don't see much. Okay, let me go to the next slide. So this is, see, if you look at into the picture there, on the right, on the left hand side, small seedlings, and on the left hand side, bigger seedlings at different stages. Already at a certain stage, on the left are hybrids, on the right they are parents. So all these, whether it's the leaf area of the cotyledons or if it is the length of the seedling, all these changes between 1 to 10 days, they're all becoming very clear. So now see, this is morphology. On the basis of morphology, the differences are very clear. Now let me go to relative growth rate. Now this is very important. In relative growth rate, if we see, this black, red, gray, all these things are telling us 1 day, 4 days, 6 days, 8 days, and 10 days. We see in the top level, black, they're all equal. Purple, they're all equal. Gray, they're all equal. What happens is it's between the 1 to 3 days. We see the two parents on the extremes, they're showing very faint blue bars, but hybrids, they're already showing a lot of movement there. There's a lot of relative growth is very high in the, so here itself, 1 to 3 days, we can tell which are the hybrids because the relative growth rate is very high. Similarly, from 4 to 10 days or 4 to 6 days, again, you see the red bars here on the extremes, the growth is not still the growth, there's a significant difference between growth rate, the parents and the hybrid. So up to something like 6 days. So up to 6 days, 1 to 6 days, the relative growth rate and as evidenced in the movement in the upregulation or downregulation of the on the transcript, we can tell which one are the hybrid, which one are not, which one are going to. So we can look for performing hybrids right there. Okay. Again, also, so we have talked about morphology, we have talked about transcripts, but metabolic profiling also. A lot of fatty acids, a lot of lipids, a lot of things. Without going too much into detail, if we look at the picture there and we look at the curves which are going up and down, we see in all the 4 curves, right in the middle, we see the steep curve going from up or down. And mind you, it's going from up to down and from down to up, both the ways. So this shows that even the metabolites like fatty acids, like lipids, they're also showing. So it's not just transcripts. So we can do a lot of GCFID or let's say GCMS. And then we have to look at the metabolites, and that also gives quite a picture. And we can tell from the metabolites about which are going to be the good hybrids and which are, Okay. Now, we have talked about transcriptional profiling. In this case, they use the Affymetrix chip. And this I'm going to skip. Basically, whatever the message I wanted to give, I've given. So I'm not going to give. Now, what is the take-home message? The take-home message here is that few days starting between 3 and 4. That is the time I will say between 1 to 6 or anywhere between 6 to 10 days. There is a lot happening in terms of morphology, metabolomics, in terms of transcripts. All these differences, there's a lot happening. They are going up and they are going down, and on the basis of that relative growth or up and down movement, hybrids can be discriminated. These are the references, and now the other thing is, I will not go too much into it for the time constraints, but the very promising area of research, which I'm going to say in the conclusions, is what are the transcripts? Like I said in the Bancroft group, they said they've got, let's say, 45 transcripts based on which they can tell you which one is going to be a hybrid. They look at those 45 hybrids and they tell you which one is a performing hybrid. And you can reject the bad ones. If there's nothing happening, you can throw them out, reject them straight away. So what are the pathways which are affected? That is where research needs to be done. And that has to be crop specific. So I think, so there's a lot of work. So they have identified some metabolites, they have identified some transcripts, but a lot more work needs to be done.
Rajiv, you can take more time to deliver your talk. No problem.
Okay, great.
Time is not a constraint.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, great. Okay, so okay, allow me. I need a sip of water, so I'll take half a minute, please. Excuse me for that.
Since there were no questions allotted or marked in activities, we have given more time to Rajiv to proceed.
Okay. Now we have done it. So we have talked about the transcripts, we have talked about the seedling stage, and now we'll talk about heterotic grouping. So, and we are now slowly moving towards how to get good hybrids. So far, this is what has really worked. Heterotic grouping. What is a heterotic grouping? Heterotic grouping, nothing but these are groups of, let's say, groups of in red lines, or groups of populations, wherein we find minimum intra-group diversity and maximum intra and maximum intergroup diversity. So if we can, let's say, let me take example of this. Well, this is a long one. This is one of my works I did earlier on cotton. And in this case, we can say something like 1,600 different plants. And this is the total germplasm. And we can see, they're going to show up into groups. And this is what grouping is all about. But coming back to this point, so heterotic grouping is about dividing a bigger germplasm into smaller groups so that the diversity within the group is less and across the groups is more. And this, by diversity, we are talking about genetic distance. And how do we look at genetic distance? We can look at the genetic distance either morphologically, or we can also use it by means of molecular markers. So now, in order to make these heterotic groups, I will not go into details, but different parameters can be used, different factors can be used. We can make dendrograms based on genetic distancing. Again, genetic distances can be based on morphological parameters, or this can be even molecular markers. Then we look at the combining ability. There, that is where for combining ability we do all those crosses, like the dialyls or partial dialyl or the North Carolina the crosses. So combining ability can be tested using the controlled crosses. And then we can use the tester, we can use top cross, we can make use of the pedigree information, we can use geographical origin, we can use morphological data, we can use transcriptomic data, and we can use method. Now, all of these things, they will provide us, slowly and slowly we are going closer to what a hybrid looks like, what a good hybrid looks like. So when we talk about the molecular techniques, they are simply adding on another layer of perfection, another layer of strength. So we can add metabolomics and transcriptomics and combine that data to the heterotic grouping, and we will have a final picture coming up. Now, how do we do it? We start with a bigger germplasm. From a bigger germplasm, we go to a core collection and to a mini core collection. And this is what we do. For example, in cotton, we had, in this particular case, I was given something like 1600 accession. And the breeder was actually using only something like 58 lines. So these 58 lines, based on the heterotic grouping, we can see that the groups are coming up. These are not the eventual groups; these are just the potential heterotic groups. So, with using molecular markers and morphological criteria, we can convert. We can home in on to a smaller group and convert it into groups which are more likely to give heterosis. Right. In this case, talking about heterotic groups, we are talking about these are all groups. Based on the left, we are having a dendrogram wherein we have groups, which is giving clear groups. And on the right hand side, just to say that principal component analysis, that is a very strong, very powerful technique. So when we are doing, based on dendrograms, so dendrograms and principal component analysis, they will go hand in hand. They both have their own strengths and weaknesses. The principal component analysis is very good at looking at the distant relationships, and the dendrogram is very good at looking at the close relationships. So they both have their strengths, and when we combine both of them, we get better heterotic groups. Okay, now I'm coming to conclusions, and I think we are just about in time. In conclusions, what I would like to say is, we started with dominance over dominant epistasis and the classical theory of genetics. And then what we have seen is that when we look at the transcriptome, we see an entire remodeling of the hybrids. So everything is shuffling. We cannot see any one gene. Yeah, something very important. You see, and this was in fact the outcome of the group which I worked with, the David Stokes work and Professor Ian Bancroft. What they found out was that when we are talking about, let's say, one character, we are looking at genes concerning one character. When we look at the transcript, there is a transcript which is affecting that character, and it has got nothing to do with that character, nothing to do with that pathway either. So we are talking about global networking. We are talking about how the whole, and that is the reason, my indication is epigenetics has a lot of role. And, all these narrow areas of dominance and over dominance, that is too narrow. We got to look at a bigger transcriptional remodeling. All those, there are cases of dominance, it happens. And I'll come to that point, how we can make use of it. So, but the whole idea is, we are talking about a unifying theory, that we are looking at a global picture and how to make use of, the ideas of dominance over dominance. I'll be also coming there. Now, so heterosis can be viewed as a result of interacting genomes resulting in complex changes at the genetic, epigenetic, biochemical, and regulatory levels. And this is the state of the art, I would say. Now, another thing is where I think we as a nation and the whole world needs to move on to, and it's been, we got to start looking at the seedling stage. You see, identify promising hybrid at the seedling stage using morphological, transcriptional, metabolomic, and biomarkers at the seedling stage, and then the rejection of non-performing hybrids right at that stage. Then use molecular markers. Now, we go for, see, dominant, like I said, dominance happens. So we can still do, now the time is, we can do QTL mapping, we can do GWAS. The good thing about QTL mapping is, I will not go into the intricacies of what all these, the QTL mapping, so my apologies, because I could not really go an introduction to these techniques, but because this is a part of the whole conclusion. And I'm sure many of us, they really understand, and there will be senior people who will, so we can do QTL mapping and GWAS and genomic selection. They all can be used to tag genes. They all can be used to map genes. Genomic selection is nothing but an advanced form of QTL mapping. They are putting a lot of markers, so even the small effect QTL can be mapped. So we can use genomic selection, we can use GWAS, wherein we don't have to do controlled crosses, and QTL mapping where we can do controlled crosses. And the idea is we can look for markers which are meant for certain genes, and if they have a dominant effect, or it doesn't matter, it's additive dominance or non-additive dominance, without going into too much details, even if it's in certain cases, even over dominance can be marked. So all these, these markers, they can be used in hybrid development. The term I should be using here is genomic prediction. So these markers can be developed based on QTL mapping, GWAS, and genomic selection. And these markers can be used for genomic prediction of the hybrids. So this will go hand in hand with other things like transcriptional profiling, along with heterotic grouping, along with metabolomic morphological, profiling. And the lastly, I would like to say is hybrids are here to stay. See, when we are talking about especially the dominance, a lot of I've come across a lot of senior, crop breeders, and a lot of them, honestly, in India and abroad. And in fact, one of my teachers, Ian McKay from National Agricultural Institute of Agricultural Naib Cambridge, and he is, and I've seen some of them in ICRISAT also, and I'm sure in this group also there are a lot of people who stand by, who will really stand by the dominance theory, and yes, and the whole point is, can we develop an inbred line which is equal to the hybrid using just the dominance model? The answer is yes. In some of the cases, it has happened. Like I've said earlier, in some cases, dominance can be 70-80%, and obviously, you combining all those genes, which have got nothing to do with the overall genome, combining all those genes, we can get inbred lines which are as good as the hybrid. But the point is, I mean, who's got the time to go from inbred line, stacking all these genes together and make an inbred line, going through 7, 8, 10 different generations? Why not make a hybrid? So that is the reason it is said, and this is what I would like to say, that hybrids are here to stay. Regardless of these theories of dominance, over dominance, epispecimen, whatever, hybrids will continue to exist and they will be needed. Okay, now future research. In future research, like I said, identify transcripts associated with heterosis. This work needs to be done. Also, the causal relationship between, what are the changes in epigenetic marks and transcript levels? What are they doing with different pathways? So these pathways, they will have to be, because the moment we become more and more precise about what genes are doing what, this whole process of looking at good hybrids will be easier. It will be, at a very early stage, we will be able to tell which genes we are looking at and how to, and which metabolites we are looking for. So this process of associating transcripts and metabolites and methylome with the pathways, this is an ongoing process. Secondly, this model needs to be tested. The prediction of heterosis at seedling stage using transcriptional, morphological, metabolomic profiling. I wanted to make a good slide, a separate slide on this, which I could not make for lack of time. But I think this is a model which really needs to be tested. Okay, now the take-home message which I would like to deliver is, for a moment, think of the impact on seed industry of screening hybrids at seedling stage without the need for field testing. The saving in terms of time and resources, as also the increase in efficiency of hybrid crop variety development. But let me, in the same breath, I would like to say, that all these molecular and all these lab-based techniques, they are only for initial analysis. From 2,500 hybrids, a breeder will be selecting only 3 hybrids, which eventually is going to advance to the trialing stage or finally select. But using these approaches, we can cut down those 2,500 marker, those initial hybrids down to a very, even if it comes to 100, I mean, the effort that already means a lot of ground is covered, and that can bring in sweeping changes. This can be a game changer, and I mean, making use of these new advancements, I think there's no reason why. But eventually, the eventual decision will be taken in the field. So all these approaches, they will help in rejection, but the eventual selection will come in the field. But till that time, there's a lot which can be improved, and there's a lot of gain to be made. And that is where I would like to complete my talk, and over to the two organizers, Dr. Krishna Reddy and Aparna, please. I'm open for questions, please.
Krishna Prasad. Okay. Dr. Surendika, will you have any questions? Because no questions have been posted. If you have anything.
Yeah. I certainly. You can
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Rajiv, can you hear me?
Yes, Arun, I can hear.
Yeah, Rajiv, simply very first thing that you are always awesome while presenting, and you are having such a theoretical, practical experience that it could be really useful for the agri-science. I have one question. With all your knowledge and experience, Rajiv, have you ever thought of designing any software for predictive breeding? Means for different crops, if you get like data, molecular data and phenotypic data, and you can design like predictive breeding. Have you ever thought of designing such kind of software?
Arun, the thing is, you see, we are talking about interdisciplinary fusions. I started with botany. I went on to cell biology, then molecular biology, then bioinformatics, then molecular biology, and then everything. You see, now making a software is hardcore, computer sciences. And I know it's very important for a scientist to draw lines. I mean, if we try to do everything, so I mean, I'm very clear. I want to get just the bits and pieces which are of my use, and I want to leave the real interfaces to the, so this is something which a software developer can do better. So, I mean, I really wish Dr. Abhishek Rathore from
No, Rajiv,
okay,
Rajiv, Rajiv, thing is that like if you ask me for like various scientists, it's not like a person like me. Means you get a data of like genetic diversity. So it is not clear that if like you cross any two diverse lines, you get like positive heterosis or negative heterosis, right?
Yeah.
Because so many factors are involved.
Yeah.
So, well, with your knowledge, I think if you can define all such kind of things to a computer person, that would be able to design such kind of thing, which could be really useful for the complete seed industry, not for a person, not for a company. Complete seed industry, I would say.
Arun Bhai, that is what I'm doing right now. I mean, this is obviously this. I'm giving out everything that I have, and I would be very open, and I don't charge for this. So anybody approach me, and I mean, I would be very happy to share all that I have. Okay. So, but the thing is,
okay, thank you.
My resources are limited, and as a single man, not much. But I'm very happy to share. Yeah.
Just a few comments.
Thanks.
Rajiv, I have a few comments, but I would request you to first stop sharing so that we can have an interaction.
Oh, sorry about that.
So that, we are just talking to each other and not seeing the slide.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I should have done that earlier. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
So just,
okay.
Yeah, now we can. So I have a few, thank you for a very nice talk. I mean, molecular breeding over the last, I think 2 decades has really brought lots of changes in how we breed, especially in selecting earlier and rejecting a lot of material. Now, the question is the heterosis. I have a very familiar, description of heterosis, and I would like to share, because there may be people who may not have heard me, that when you see Aishwarya Rai's parents, you cannot predict Miss Universe, right?
Yeah.
So that is the same thing in plant breeding or animal breeding, that you cannot predict what will give you those. So as you said, the combination of overdominance, dominance, epistasis, for me, as a practical plant breeder, the proof of the pudding lies in the cake. So we do the process and we see the prediction. Sorry, we see the performance in the field.
Yeah.
Your transcriptome analysis can definitely help us reject a lot of things. But one thing I want to mention is, at what stage do we do this? For me, yield is not the only thing that we breed for. Especially if it comes to vegetables, I call it heterosis for cosmetics. If you have the highest yield, if the fruit is soft, you cannot sell even 1 gram of seed. So there is a plethora of genes that we are selecting into that final hybrid that we have to sell in the market. So in my opinion, that makes me happy also, that a real plant breeder will never lose his job, because he knows the germplasm. He has to evaluate the germplasm. Actually, what should happen, in my opinion, is that this
he's the boss. He's the boss. He's the king.
And the breeder must get together at germplasm stage, and we must not lose germplasm only what we are using today. Most of the time we are just breaking down F2s, which is the same germplasm getting reused, and we don't see really big changes in the final. So what we need to do is, we need to look at the pan genome. I think recently there was a very good article done on tomatoes by Giovanni in Cornell University, and you have recently seen legume pan genome analysis by Rajiv Vashni and his group. And this is the beginning of what I feel will happen for heterosis in future, is to do the principal component analysis of not only the phenotypic traits for yield and other components that we need in the commercial hybrid, also at the nutritional level, from the proteins.
Exactly, absolutely, sir.
Those things are then grouped, and then we do a crossing plan, and then you correlate your technology and the actual performance. That information will finally help us reduce the number of hybrids that we take to the farm. Take to the farm for testing and multi-nutrition testing. So I think what is needed is a brilliant collaboration now between a good germplasm breeder, a good technology breeder, and software, as Dr. Agarwal very rightly said. So these kind of things have to happen in each crop, and then only we will reach where we need to reach. Because yield alone will not help us reduce the workload. We need to, like I'll tell you another. I know for sure that I can cross and break down a really good hybrid coming from a good, diverse material, some new genetics. But then if you go to the F2s and then you select your F3s at wide hotspots, and then keep the selections of different hotspots separate, and then make a large top cross, you can still get heterotic hybrids. But what will happen is, you will find what don't belong to heterotic groups and what are non-heterotic. So you can keep those separate that are non-heterotic for further breeding. The heterotic groups can be kept separate, and then you can develop first phase hybrids, and then you can keep on adding traits to those parents that have been identified through that. So I think you brought in a very good point that we need to have much more technology. A lot of it is happening in the real big companies in private sector.
Exactly.
I know.
I'm sure they are doing. They just don't have.
Because they are doing it. I can tell you they are doing it, and doing it on a big way. And in 10 years, you will see things happening based on what you said today. And thank you for bringing all those points to the platform. I'm sure people enjoyed your, lecture. very good, and I hope there are some other points people can come up. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anybody have any questions? Otherwise, we'll conclude it with my remarks. I think no questions were there. Just I summarized some of the points from the lecture given by our Rajiv, and he made an explicit explanation on dominant theory and only hybrid yield and not other traits. Well explained about the dominance, over-dominance, epistasis, and epitopic gene effects on heterosis. And imprinting of dominance of either parent on another is a common. Then well explained about the transcriptional evidence, prediction of heterosis in hybrid crops, that's very important. Based on relative growth analysis, relative growth, he can also predict the heterosis. And heterotic grouping can be done, maximum interdiversity can be made at the seedling expression stage itself. We can make, that is also he has mentioned, and it's a very, very important thing. And I thought he will also tell about something about this CRISPR technologies and all in exploiting the heterosis or enhancing the heterosis, but he just missed it. I don't know whether it is under the purview or not. I don't know. Anyhow, but it's a coming days. It is a big market. It is about in 2023. It is going to be a $14.6 billion US market alone CRISPR technology, and it is CAGR is about 13.95%. Then there is a good scope for this also. This may be, you may think over it. The plant breeders are continuously investing in these technologies to explore the genetic basis of the trait variation in crops with a higher accuracy and within the limited timeline. Companies such as Bayer, Syngenta, KWS, DuPont, and all the things are doing already in this line. And such type of things, if you can put it in our minds, especially in our Indian companies, it will be a great help for increasing our productivity and also developing a good, I can say, good yield and also resistant hybrids with both biotic and abiotic stresses. I thank you very much for giving me a nice lecture, hearing me nice lecture. And Dr. Aparna has suggested, has asked me, there is another forthcoming interesting lecture will be there by Dr. Jagdish Kumar, doubling productivity and breeding soybean for nutraceutical properties in India. It will be very, very interesting. She has asked me to announce in this meeting. I thank you very much once again, Dr. Aparna, Rajiv, Suren, for their putting me in this moderator position. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, and we look forward to hearing Dr. Jagdish Kumar next.
Thank you, Dr. Pathak. Namaskar, Dr. Pathak ji.
Legume breeding at ICRISAT, and I think it will be a very nice lecture too.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything, madam, would you like to suggest? Tell?
Sorry?
Dr. Aparna, anything you would like to tell?
Yeah.
No, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, right.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Well done.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rajiv.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Truly
Thank you very much, sir.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Thank you.
Thanks, organizer. Thanks, Sal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good.
Thank you, everybody, for joining the call, and looking forward to see you again next month. Have a great weekend.